standing up, sitting down, and okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone to our public debate today, which is on the motion, "This House regrets the commercialization of LGBT plus pride." It's going to be a great debate. We have some great speakers lined up in front of you, you can see. But before we get to the talking, I'm just going to have to make a few little announcements about who we are, what we do, and how the debating will work. So I'm the president of the society. Goss, this is the vice president, Emma. We're going to be chairing tonight's debate. Every Monday at 7, we run a public debate, usually in a different venue and usually in a different topic. We have a wide variety of things. We've had things this term on Obama's legacy. We've had things on NATO. We've had things on economics, social issues, as you can see today, or any number of things. So it's always a great thing to come on to our Monday publics at 7 p.m. The other main thing that we run every week is on Thursday at 7 p.m. we have training sessions. In order to attend them, you do have to buy a membership of our society online or at the CSC. Obviously, these events are public to attend, and anyone can. Training is a really good thing to do. You can learn how to be a great debater. You can get into debate competitions held all over the country with great fun, lots of pizzas and alcohol, and you get taught by some really great people from around London. So I encourage everyone to come to those on Thursdays at 7. I have two special announcements tonight. One I'm going to make myself. One is about the UCL IB, which is our big intervarsity competition we run every year. It's getting bigger than ever this year. We're holding it over 2 days, and we have everything in place but one thing. We need accommodation for people who are coming to compete in our competition. Every competition around the country works in this way. You go to it, and while you're competing, you stay in a house of people from the debating society or their friends. And it's a great thing to have someone who's interested in knowledge and crashing in your house for one night. And when you do it, you can get to attend our final for free, get to come to our social, which is a really great event to happen on a Saturday night. So if anyone's interested in that, you can talk to Luca, or you can go to the sign-up form, which is online on our website. I encourage everyone to do that if they want to get more involved in society, or if they just want to come along and see what should be a great event. My second sub-announcement will be made by Conrad here, if he wants the microphone.
I think I'm good. Cheers. Okay. So a week before that, on the 5th of March, we're also hosting UCL Schools, which is like one of the biggest tournaments for schools children in British parliamentary debating in Britain. It's going to be also bigger than ever, or at least bigger, it's biggest in living memory of mine. It's going to host about 150 school kids competing in about 76 teams. That means that we need a lot of judges, and we don't currently have a lot of judges. So if we could have you sign up to judge that event, that would be great. That would also mean that we can host it, which would be helpful. So there is a link to that on the event page. Do all sign up if you can make it. It's going to be a very, very fun day, and you're going to be very, very pleased that you're doing some good service for some very, very talented kids. Secondly, we also need volunteers for that, to make sure that no kids get lost, hurt themselves, get hungry, anxious, etc., etc., etc. Volunteers do a very, very important job, and volunteers are also on call. So if you could sign up to volunteer, if you don't feel like you want to judge, there's also a link to volunteer on our event page. That help would be greatly appreciated, and I'll love you forever if you do sign up, so please do. It will mean loads to me. Thank you.
A great announcement for a great event. So yes, if you're interested in schools or the IB, please do talk to people or go on the website. They're going to be very fun. One announcement before I talk about how the night's going to work. Please don't record anyone tonight. We live stream the public debates, and you can find a link to that on the event on our Facebook page. Usually, if anyone's here, not here, who wants to watch, they can do that. But we need to get the explicit informed consent of everyone who's speaking in order to do that. And so, in case anyone who's speaking or who's in the floor speech later is not given that, please don't record yourself. Lastly, we have wine at the back and juice at the back. If you want to get involved with either of those things, go back there and pick it up. Please do it in a gap between speeches if you can, because obviously it's quite difficult to get out. We don't want to be disrupting during people's speaking time, which they have so kindly given up for us tonight. how tonight is going to work. Each of the main speakers here will speak for 7 minutes. At 1 minute into this 7-minute speech, Vice President M will bang the gavel like this, and then anyone in the audience who wants to can ask a question or make a short statement to these speakers. They do this by standing up and saying, on that point, or a question, or something like that. Every speaker is at liberty to say no if someone asks a question. So don't feel offended if you are refused, and feel free to refuse. It's time to accept one maybe, but it's completely your choice. At 6 minutes in, we'll have another bang. And then please stop offering questions. For the last minute of the 7-minute speech is protected time during which the speaker can speak without fear of interruption. At 7 minutes, we will have 2 bangs. And that is the signifier that the speech is coming to a close. At 7 minutes, 15 seconds, we'll start banging some more because it's really fun to do. Now, after these 4 main 7-minute speeches, which will happen in the order of 1 from proposition, who you see on your right, and 1 from opposition, then another from proposition and another from opposition, you will get to the floor speeches. This is when anyone sitting in the audience can make a speech of their own of 3 minutes if they're interested in doing so. It's a really good thing to do, not just because it's a great experience to speak in front of loads of people, take it from me, it's super fun, but you can also win a prize. We have 2 to offer, the ones which we always offer, a bottle of port, fine port, or a bottle of chocolates, very fine chocolates. Go for one of them. I'm tired of carrying them around and not being able to eat them. It's torture, but if you get them, you can reward yourself, and it will be great. So we'll have speeches like that, floor speeches from anyone who wants to give one, of 3 minutes or less, in one of 3 positions. We'll have proposition in favour of the motion, so saying that you do regret commercialisation. We'll have opposition, saying that you don't regret it. And we'll also have the 3rd position you can take, abstention. Abstention means you are in the middle. It means that you are undecided. It means that you're not totally persuaded, or you cannot place yourself on one of the sides. So if you've got something to say, but you don't want to place it in a political context, or if you just want to ask a question of everyone, come up and give an abstention speech. After these floor speeches, we'll get to the summary speeches. These will work in that each side will have 3 minutes, each speaker will have 3 minutes in which to finalize their side's arguments. Opposition will go first this time around in a clump, so we'll have a 3-minute speech from each of them, and then the proposition will come after. No points of information during there, so anything you want to get out vocally, make sure that you do it during the POIs and the main speeches, or if you've got it in a floor speech after that. There is one more way you can engage as well as those 2 things. You can tweet with the hashtag UCLUdebating. Usually that appears on a huge wall behind us. Tonight it's not, because that would blind both me and our speakers, and that's bad. It will be appearing on the screen for anyone who's supposed to see it, or of course you can just go on Twitter and search hashtag UCLUdebating, which is great fun, great way to engage if you don't necessarily want to speak, if you have lost your voice, if you just want to get your thoughts out there without getting anything in front of it. Introduce tonight, I would like to introduce the most important thing about tonight, our speakers. I will talk about all of them in turn before we get to their speeches. Can I first have a round of applause for all of them before you know who they are? Because we know who they are, it is incredibly kind of them to have given up their time for us tonight. Speaking first in proposition, we have Matt Borghini. Matt is a member of the UCL Debating Society and is the current Black and minority ethnic representative of the LGBT+ network at UCL. They've been part of the LGBT+ network for the past 2 years, and in that time has become increasingly active within the pan-London university community, wishing to increase visibility and platforms for people of colour to speak about their experiences, which are often ignored. They previously spoke to the Debating Society in October as part of the Black History Month regarding the role that media plays in institutional racism. Please welcome Matt here tonight. Second in proposition, we have Dan Liverick. Dan works and lives in London and was involved in RIP Pride, in which activists held a mock funeral march that led the 2015 parade in order to commemorate the lost focus on equality and protesting against social injustice that the Pride marches once embodied. As a founding member of Friends of the Joiners Arms, he's involved in campaigns aiming to end the spate of queer venue closures across London under the current phrase of gentrification. Dan is also involved in campaigns and actions challenging the rise of UKIP and the far right. ACT UP London, a direct action group aiming to end the HIV pandemic and eradicate social stigma associated with the virus, and aligns himself with groups opposing the pinkwashing of Israeli occupation and apartheid. Please welcome Dan here tonight. And now, speaking first in opposition, we have Rob Eagle. Rob is a documentary filmmaker, often focusing on the queer communities and histories. By day, he is an in-house multimedia producer at UCL, and by night, she is a drag performer by the name of Betty Swallows. You can catch Betty in action on the 23rd of May at The Glory in Haggerston. Please welcome Rob here tonight. And speaking second in opposition and last in our order is Lucas Conisto. Lucas is a trained social worker, youth worker, psychologist, and coach. For the last 9 years, he has been manager of Mosaic LGBT Youth Centre, supporting, eradicating, and inspiring LGBT young persons aged between 13 and 19. Lucas is also a member of Pride in London Community Advisory Board for young people, having experience working as a helpline counsellor, a mental health counsellor, and an activist. He is also a manager at the National Citizenship Service. Please welcome Lucas here tonight. And I want to do one final thing before we hear from our first speaker, Matt. We need to take a vote right now, before you've heard anything, so you can compare the vote afterwards to the vote now and see if you've been persuaded by our speakers or if your views were what they once and always were. So, if I can get 2 volunteers up to count the votes, I will take us through the 3 positions which you can stand in, which I remind you are proposition, opposition, and abstention in the middle or uncertain. So, who in the room right now thinks that they are in proposition on the motion, this House regrets the commercialisation of LGBT plus pride? Looks like we've got the numbers down, so lower your arms, but raise them if you are an opposition voter. If you do not regret the commercialisation of LGBT pride, if you are in opposition at this moment on the motion. Keep your hand high so we can see. Excellent, looks like we've got those as well. And finally, abstention. Who doesn't know which of the 2 ends to place themselves at and ends up in the middle? Who is an abstention voter? Ace. Looks like we've got our numbers, we've got our audience, and we've got our speakers. One final round of applause for all the speakers, please. And now, as I throw them the mic, one round of applause to welcome Matt as our first speaker in proposition.
But like,
Yeah.
okay. So, by definition, commercialization is the process of introducing a new product that can be readily available in the mass market to be bought as a commodity. And Pride, or LGBT plus pride, is a social movement characterized by the positive stance taken by our community against systematic repression. Therefore, by commercializing Pride, you're essentially commodifying and therefore exploiting a group of people in a space that was specifically designed to protest against said exploitation, discrimination, and ruthless targeting by the powerful institutions. Therefore, commercialisation is surely counterproductive towards the main cause and goal of Pride. But if we're still not convinced, then it's important to acknowledge and educate ourselves of our history, the origins of the LGBT+ movement, and the underlying power structures present in our society, to understand how we have ended up in this situation and hence having this particular debate in the first place, since actions do not take place within a vacuum. I'll later go on to discuss the greatest victims within our community of commercialisation and why it is symptomatic of a widespread issue. Now, gender and sexuality are all social constructs. The ranking of people based on arbitrary behavioural differences amongst human beings, and whether or not they may fit within the gender binary or based on who they've got sex with, or just used to justify the ransacking of inferior cultures across the world. Economic gain of select few in the Western world. As such, both constructs came into prominence during hypercolonialism, the impact of which still remains to this very day, with consensual same-gender sex being legal in only 13 of the 53 Commonwealth states. Colonialism was fueled by aggressive demand of capital, which can be summarized by themes such as exploitation, which commercialisation is based on. So commercialisation is merely an avenue through which these people can continue to exert their dominance in our so-called post-colonial society. We've been lulled into a false sense of security, an illusion of inclusion, if you will. We have recently in years seen, increases of LGBT+ visibility in, say, media platforms or position in government. However, there's still far more that needs to be done. For instance, 2015 was regarded as the big, breakthrough year for trans people and their rights, but that didn't stop, acts of violence against them from increasing. So by selling the idea that we are in an age of complete tolerance and harmony, this creates a golden opportunity for big corporations to act under the guise of camaraderie and alliance. But it doesn't just stop there. We need to acknowledge that we do not just live in a heteronormative society. White supremacy, patriarchy, and cissexism are just a few other power structures that take our lives as well. And given that the LGBT+ community is not an homogenous zone, and that we have a whole range of different gender identities, ethnic backgrounds, and sexuality within it, it is such that a hierarchy is also placed within our community that allows other people to actually have more chances of having said visibility and awarenesses spread across different platforms. So if we have a TV or film production company who wants to write an LGBT+ film or television program, or HSBC wanting to sponsor an event such as Pride, you have to look at who is running those events and what experiences that they have that enables them to target or sell those events to other people. Most of these corporations are owned and run by cis white men, and given that their experiences are sheltered by the privileges that have been gained from them at birth, essentially, it means that they can only, their job of targeting and appealing to many people for these products or these television shows are limited, because they can only really directly identify with themselves. Cis white male are the only things they know, so those are the only things they can target. Commercialisation strengthens the continued prominence of cis white gay men known as the face of the LGBT+ community. And it's another example of white people erasing the voices of people of colour while taking credit for the work we have done. For instance, Stonewall protests, first major breakthrough in the LGBT+ community in 1969, led by Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, two trans women of colour, who led the resistance against a police raid at Stonewall Inn in New York. Both women became prominent figures within the community. For instance, Johnson fought hard to combat the extortionate prices of experimental AIDS drugs in the height of the 1980s AIDS epidemic. Since commercialisation of Pride picked up momentum, Pride is becoming increasingly ill-welcoming towards the people who kick-started the movement in the first place. Otherwise, there would be no need for a Black Pride or lesbian Pride. People of colour, women, and trans people within our community already suffer from racism, sexism, and transphobia respectively from society at large. So to already have this coming from within our community comes as an even bigger blow. We need an outlet and we need a chance to express our experiences because of the way in which the interacting power structures are. It means that our experiences vary, and we need a chance to have an outlet. And by branding or Pride as an event that caters for a specific person, it means that we should use that outlet. The first Pride that I attended was when I was 17. It was in 2012. And this is around the time that I wasn't very aware or in with intersectionality, although that was to come very soon. One event that occurred that day struck out to me, and it has more significance based on what I know today, in which a group of trans women were being assaulted physically in a crowded street in Soho, whilst onlookers were mocking and laughing at them. One of my friends that day, a female friend of mine, had to defend them and take them away from the situation to ensure that they're safe. And that shocked me because I assumed that, you know, this is a family for me, and that this is my home, and this is somewhere that I can feel welcomed, or everyone can feel welcome. But I've realised in retrospect, it is because certain people at these events feel allowed to act in certain ways and have disregard for other people because they feel like this revolves around them, and this is an event specifically for them, so they can disbelieve that the LGBT plus community revolves around them. So to conclude, supporting commercialisation not only supports the oppression of LGBT plus people from society at large, but also it supports the continual erasure and voices of trans people, women, and people of colour within our community. So you're essentially not only dismissing my views, but also the views of several people sitting with you in the audience today, each of whom have every right of existing and justifying their existence. Therefore, I proudly stand in support of tonight's motion.
I thank Matthew for that excellent speech, and passes a hand from the microphone over to who already has it. Rob, we are our first opposition speaker. Please welcome him tonight.
I think it's very easy to be very anti-corporation, isn't it? You know, it appears that the big bad evil banks like Barclays and Citibank are using Pride as a PR exercise to pinkwash over their dodgy deeds. So why do I support the commercialization of Pride? Well, my argument against the motion is structured thus. So one, the financial realities. Corporate sponsors are needed to subsidize the event for smaller groups. That's just a fact. Number two, a little historical perspective. Might surprise you. And number three, the need for diversity of perspectives at Pride, whether or not you agree with them, from the radical to the mainstream. So point one, how else are we going to pay for it? Let's be realistic, big corporations are needed to fund Pride nowadays. As the mayor of London seems content to blow millions on a silly garden bridge, we need to rustle up cash from somewhere. £600,000 of sponsorship on top of £100,000 from the mayor, to be exact. So that's just the nature of such a large event in London. The money has to come from somewhere. Yes, other sponsors of Pride in London include big companies with questionable ethical records, like Tesco's, Starbucks, Asda. Ever buy things from them? You can criticize them for their tax dodging and exploitation of suppliers. I do. But not everyone who works at these companies is evil. Later. Not yet. To march within the parade, these big companies pay literally 10 times as much as the small charities. That seems fair to me. The corporate sponsors and big company groups make it possible for niche and special interest groups to have visibility and to raise awareness. Groups like Christians at Pride, Opening Doors, Polyamory UK, the Pink Singers, Anal Angels, or Puppy Pride, which is a leather animal fetish costume group, in case you didn't know. The corporations are needed to subsidize these wonderful, diverse, smaller groups. Point two, a little historical perspective. Some proponents of the motion say that commercialization has depoliticized Pride. If you believe Matt's definitions of both commercialization and also what he thinks Pride should be, they think it should go back to being a political protest. But let's not over-romanticize Pride. It hasn't been a purely political protest in over 3 decades, long before commercial sponsorship. It did begin as a protest march in 1972. But in the early 80s, it had already become a big party, a celebration of all things queer, from the kinky and subversive to the mainstream, which is why some of the feminist and women's groups left Pride then. Some participants of Pride in the 70s, like Julie Bindel, believe that political protest and hedonism cannot coexist. Pride should just be a radical political march, such as Matt was espousing here. I disagree. I think movements and events change with the times. Yes, it used to be a political protest, but it hasn't been for over 35 years. It became more of a celebration, and it still is. Don't blame corporate sponsorship on the depoliticization of Pride. I do agree that campaigning and political marches are needed as much now as they were in 1972. They can exist and march alongside the big corporations at Pride. It's not one or the other, despite what Matt or Judy Mandel might say. The marches of the 70s were all about disparate groups of gay men, lesbians, trans, hippies, yuppies, everything in between marching together, even if they hated each other. Even today, Julie Bindel herself is a trans exclusionist feminist, but there's still a place for her, even within the LGBT family. I say Pride is a motley mix of groups with diverse interests, some of whom hate each other. That aspect at least has remained unchanged since 1972. That leads to point 3. Pride is a place for everyone, even the corporate office workers, not just the loudest political protesters. For those employees of Barclays and Tesco's and Starbucks, it means a lot to them to know that their companies support them and empower them. Pride is an opportunity for a company to put their money where their mouth is by openly celebrating their queer employees, not just pinkwash. Yes?
Do you think it's possible for these people to somehow engage with the LGBT plus movement without actually doing it through the prism of like their corporation that they actually work for?
It is possible, but the point for them is they are proud to march with their companies. That for many of us, if we spend most of our working day, such as myself at work, as I might be at UCL, I'm very proud to march with UCL over marching with another group. So let me follow on. So my point here is that we shouldn't vilify their out and proud LGBTQ employees. Yes, they choose to work with their companies. They choose to march with their companies, with their colleagues. Within those companies, these queer networks are leading change and openness among their coworkers. You have to understand what LGBTQ networks are within corporations. They do lead change, and I see it every day here at UCL. These corporate groups marching at Pride also provide examples to other companies that the corporate world needn't be horribly homophobic or transphobic. As students, one day you too will have to find jobs, maybe even at big corporations. When that day comes, you'll be bloody grateful if they have a queer network, as I am, to work here at UCL. You want a policy that values LGBTQ equality and visibility in the workplace. Who knows, you might even end up marching with one of these groups one day. Importantly, not everyone can be a radical political protester. Not every LGBTQ person wants to bang a drum, shout slogans, wear glitter on their face, or frocks, or wigs, or other things that some of us might do. Some queer people are rather happy to work in a bank, wear a suit, and make lots of dosh. But they can still provoke corporate and legal change bit by bit. If you look at something like Stonewall, that's generally their policy. They get their funding primarily from advising big corporations and the UK. Look at how much change they provoked legally, socially, etc. in the UK. They're just as necessary as the small grassroots queer groups. Pride provides a space for both the radical and the mainstream to come together to show a full rainbow of LGBTQ perspectives. So, to conclude, just because Pride is a corporate-sponsored event doesn't mean that we can scrap it. The big companies subsidize the event for the smaller groups. Historically, Pride has not been a purely political march for over 3 decades. And the event should be for everyone, from the out and proud corporate office workers who work at Barclays and Asda, to the small fetish groups like Puppy Pride. That is why I am against the motion.
Thank you, Rob, for that excellent first opposition speech. And now I would like to turn back to the other side to ask Dan to give the second proposition speech. Please welcome Dan Hitton.
So I was invited today, I presume, from my bio, because I was involved in Rest in Peace Pride, RIP Pride, where me and a bunch of other activists held a mock funeral. We all looked fabulous, but there's a serious message, which was that the soul of Pride, what it was founded upon, and the mission, the founding mission, has been lost. And now this has been happening for many years. Rob's right, it's not new, it has been happening for 3 decades, but the commercialization process has increased over that time. And the final nail in the coffin this year was the invitation extended to UKIP, an organization known for its homophobic comments, its anti-migrant rhetoric, and the fact that its leader came out and said that people living with HIV and AIDS should not be allowed into the country. Many people who founded the Pride March died of HIV and AIDS. Do we not consider it offensive to their memory that an organization that promotes HIV stigma was invited on the march? And the reason that was given for not denying them the invitation was they paid. This is therefore integrally connected to the commercialization of Pride. But I think we should ask the question, who should Pride be for? The original objective was not to carve out a day of the year in which we could have a celebration and party and dress how we like. The original objective was to fundamentally change society. It was to fundamentally change the way in which our patriarchy and heteronormative norms regulate, restrict, and produce what is considered acceptable in our society. So when we say who should thrive before, we should be looking to who is still marginalized, dispossessed, exploited, oppressed on the basis of their gender and sexual identity. Now, the arguments in favor often rest upon an assumption that Rob iterated, that commercial and corporate entities are not fundamentally opposed to LGBT+ interests, that they are not in any way damaging. And it is a mark of how far we have come that they want to associate their brands with the LGBT cause. But the reason they want to associate their brands has absolutely nothing to do with that cause or the promotion of those issues, but to do with what it does for their brand. So we have to ask, why is it that they want their brands to be associated? And would they operate in exactly the reverse if it was profitable to do so? History says so. So, to take that point further, the reason I put forward to them wanting to associate their brands with LGBT pride is that it diverts attention away, as Rob mentioned, pinkwashing. That's one term of it. It diverts attention away from their real business. Their real business is in exploiting poverty, in corruptly manipulating credit markets to the cost of many millions in their own interest, investing in arms companies that are responsible for war crimes. Barclays, who headed this year's Pride March, invest in Albert Systems, which is complicit in the Israeli occupation. They produce it's an Israeli arms company that produces drones used on civilians. And they also and these are companies obviously that have an interest in war and conflict. And there are other companies, oil and energy companies also, who are also complicit in the destruction of our planet's biosphere, right? So their involvement is to sanitize that image, to divert attention away, and so that we forget their complicity in corruption, in exploitation, in human rights abuses. And we belittle and demean ourselves and our cause by allowing them to use our struggle and use the struggle of our predecessors in order to as a cover for those things. So what has been achieved is not a full victory. This is my next book. And it's not experienced equally by all. It is a mark of the achievements that these brands want to associate themselves. But as Matthew pointed out, these people that are benefited most are often rich white men, cisgendered men. The progress that we have experienced hasn't been experienced equally by lesbians of color, trans women, migrants, people with non-British citizenship, other nationalities. We live in a time when asylum seekers will come here, fleeing persecution on the basis of their gender or sexual identity, and then be thrown into an immigration detention center and questioned, interrogated for months on end on the veracity of their sexual identity. Now, to address these issues doesn't have to be depressing and doesn't mean we can't have fun, right? Protest is often fun, and right from 1972. Flamboyance and diversity, as Rob points out, was a big part of it. But there's a real need to tailor these events and the messages to the issues we face today, and the people who most need us to project their voices, to give them a platform. 1 in 4 LGBT people in the UK is homeless people in the UK as LGBT, right? Where are their voices? How can they afford the charges that the Pride in London board charges for participation? 25% of venues across London, LGBT venues, have closed since the recession. These are venues that all year round provide us with safe spaces, with opportunities to meet like-minded people or different people, to explore the breadth of the margins of sexual and gender identity. These places are closing, and they're closing as a result of processes of gentrification led by the financial sector, banks and Barclays. And these companies' engagement with those issues is clearly doesn't go deep enough to address how they're complicit in themselves. Now, it's not surprising that the way the direction has gone, given the broader Pride is, which delivers the event and strategic direction, is full of business buzz. Like, okay, so the chair is Michael Salter, who is a political head of broadcasting for Downing Street under the coalition. This is a coalition that led cuts to services that provide disproportionately that disproportionately serve women, black and minority ethnic groups, disabled people, LGBT people, and other organisations. And so his supposed passion for LGBT issues clearly doesn't extend to presenting any opposition to these cuts that vitally affect marginalised LGBT individuals. So I guess my closing remarks are that I think another Pride is possible, that we should return to these roots, and I believe that we should be engaging constructively with building coalitions of solidarity to fight all oppression, all marginalisation, all exploitation, because an injustice to one is injustice to all.
Excellent second speech and proposition. And now, to close the opposition arguments and indeed the main speeches as a whole, please welcome Lucas to the floor tonight.
I'm grateful. What? Can you hear me? Good. I've got a grateful job to kind of follow all of that. But I'm like, oh, I have to change all the plans about. So let's remember about the things that the Pride provides. And I think that's quite important. The Pride provides is a celebration, especially for young people. I work with young people, we have LGBT people. And I cannot stress it enough of what a transformation experience it is for them to take part in the first Pride. You see a timid, shy young person, and then they attempt the Pride, taking them through the streets of London, central London, that normally are kind of home to abuse and hate crime, and they become flamboyant and as places they want. People who are standing and clapping and encouraging to be themselves. It's really, really empowering experience, and we have to remember that it is that experience because it is supported and sponsored for it to be safe and inclusive. And by inclusive, I mean inclusive of young people, because it has to be safe. For my youth group to go to that event, I have to be 155% sure this is a safe place for them to be, that nobody will get harmed, that nobody will get their head kicked in. I've got legal responsibility. It is also a platform for people to protest, and it is also a place where people can find empowerment through the corporate bodies to see their employer saying, we are all for your equality. Come and work for us because we are here to make sure that you are inclusive. What is quite important is that we remember that the Pride has got a body, community advisory body, that is I'm a member of, and we give them guidance in terms of their sponsorship. So there is a statement that we have actually produced that I can now release. The companies and organizations providing sponsorship or other engagement with London LGBT Pride events are invited to confirm that they demonstrate standards of ethical good practice, particularly with effective equality and diversity policies and practices, and where practical, encouragement of similar good practices through their supply chain. So that is something that we encourage as a community advisory board. We have released that statement, and it is now in consultation process to make sure that this is what sponsors are actually buying into in terms of the wider Pride. Pride costs £723,000 per year. It's not just a parade down the road. It is the barriers, it is the cleaning, it is the security, it is all the effort that goes before and after. Pride is free. When you're talking about inclusion, how can the event inclusive when it is not free? The Pride in London remains free to everyone who takes part. Yes, smaller groups have to contribute, but I'm telling you now, £60 that we have to pay to make sure that my young people are marching in that parade and are saying is nothing. And I'll pay double that to make sure that it is safe. Yes.
If you think Pride is so important, and I absolutely agree with you on this, then why is it not the case that the state should also be providing money to actually put these events on rather than private and corporate interests?
Well, I believe that you know, if we were in the luxurious environment where the state is able to provide it, my organizations have had their funding pulled. Face Health has closed down a few weeks back as a charitable organization. We know that there are funding issues, and the state is being cut left, right, and center. Are we able to then say, okay, can the state provide this? When at the same time, junior doctors get a worse deal. Are we able to do that? Are you happy for the LGBT community to be like, well, pay for our Pride? And you know, let's not care about the schooling system. Let's not care about NHS. Sorry, but that's not a sustainable way of doing it. I think for the public relations for it to be sustainable, for it to be self-sustained, for it to be safe, it has to be sponsored by someone who, yeah, maybe they don't pay taxes, but this is the way we can get that money back off them. So excuse me, if you don't pay your taxes, we are going to get that money back to our community. Sorry, you were saying. Yeah. Move on.
700,000 is to us a large amount of money, but I mean, the state spends a huge amount of things on tribute, which some people think are totally unnecessary.
Well, I agree with you, but sadly, I don't have what Pride does not have influence over. Doesn't have influence over what states decide to spend their money on. At the moment, there's the between NHS and the Trident. Yes, I agree with that. That's not kind of Trident. That's not a crowdfunding for Trident. Those people who want it can buy it. And that's about it. Yeah, sorry. Yes, fabulous idea. Sadly, I'm not in charge of it. Pride isn't in charge of it. What Pride has to do is to react within the environment it is in. The Pride, London Pride, as well as all the other Prides, they have to make sure that they are sustainable. And so the only way to do it, like we have been running at a loss for the last 2 years. We only made a tiny little profit in terms of safeguarding the future and making sure there's enough money in the pot to pay in advance people who need to get paid. Only last year, and it's only like couple of £1,000. I can't release account until 8th of March, so I can't tell you exactly how much, but it's really tiny amount of money. So it's not like if someone is running it and they are pocketing you money, off you go kind of thing. Yeah, thank you for that business. That's not running like that at all whatsoever. It's a community event for it to be inclusive. For it, who is paying for the accessibility of the people who are on wheelchairs? Who is paying for making sure that the screens at the Trafalgar Square have got the transcript of what is happening, so that people who have got hearing problems are able to actually participate in that event fully? Who is going to pay for all that? Are you able to pay for it? Okay, let me put it that way. The Pride has actually held a crowdfunding, right? Failed. Did not reach its target. It was only like 35 grand. Yeah? Now, you think that all those funds that you put into the box are going to add to much. Okay, that's 30 grand last year. That's how much the whole of the LGBT community have contributed. You want the Pride to resign from corporate sponsors, put the money into your pocket, take out all the things that you have in there, put it randomly here. I'll take it to Pride. After taking my own stuff. I'm joking, I'm going to take everything of it. I'll take it back to Pride, and then I'm going to send an email tomorrow once we raise £700,000, because of the all of we're very rich now here. We'll be very happy to tell them, back off, we don't need your money, we are off. We have our own event, it's safe, secure, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ken regard. Yes.
On that point, what if corporations giving money to Pride instead gave money not to a party but to actual structural resources that were doing important activist work for the LGBT community?
Couldn't agree more, because as a Mosaic LGBT Center, we would love to get the money, like give it enough. But sadly, that's not how it works. Like the corporates have to have something back for it, and sometimes it is the exposure of the brand, and sometimes it is local here and local there. In all honesty, you can take as much notice of it, or as little notice of it, as you personally choose. Because it's nothing different than having a banner on a flipping Harold anyway. So you can take a note of it, or you don't have to take a note of it, but that's kind of what they're getting back for it. When it comes to them giving the money to charities, they are more inclined to give money to charities that give them something back, Stonewall, right? So they get loads of money from corporate sponsors because they're giving them, you can use that, leader of the Stonewall, here you are. So put your label on the website, off you go, you're fabulous. So, but this is what it works like. Small organizations, grassroots organizations like ours will not have an access. Wow. Who am I giving it to?
Another thank you to all of our main speakers tonight. They will, of course, be speaking again, but in their 3-minute summary speeches. But before we do that, we have the floor speeches, which can be made in proposition, in opposition, or in abstention. And that is the order in which I'll ask for. They cap out at 3 minutes, will bang once at 30 seconds, once at 2 minutes 30, and twice at 3. And again, you can offer points of information in the speeches between that 30 and 2 minute 30 second bracket. But it doesn't have to be that long. If you have a short comment you want to make, and you don't even stretch it out that long, don't fear, just come up and say it. Speeches of all lengths and speeches of all qualities. One will win a delicious bottle of port, or a more delicious, less delicious, I'm not sure, box of chocolates. You guys get to find out. I've explained everything, I think. So I can ask for the first one. And I'll ask for a first one in proposition of this motion. So who wants to give a 3 minutes or less floor speech in favour of the motion that this House regrets the commercialisation of LGBT plus crime. I have 4 hands. I will pick personally and randomly you there. There's my
Commercialisation is a natural progression of LGBT pride from what was once an underground struggle to what is now a large-scale parade through the streets of London. From a grassroots struggle to mainstream awareness, commercialising pride is a sign of momentum in mainstream in what is a capitalist society. However, it is also, as we're arguing, a move away from an authentic sense of what pride is. When I say authentic, I mean it has a sense of origin or soul. Britain's first Pride was in July 1972. There was an intimidating police presence, but nevertheless a sense of radicalism, and what we hope we still have, a pride in being clear. But these days it's far less radical to believe a man could love another man, and slightly less radical to believe someone assigned female at birth could grow up and realise that they are male. This is why I am asserting that commercialisation is a natural progression for pride. Pride is outgrowing its radical and rebellious identity and has entered into the mainstream. Commercialisation makes pride bigger, but whether it makes pride better is up for debate. It has now become beneficial for companies to support LGBT pride. It makes sense for them to support pride because it's good for business. Brand exposure is huge. Companies who agree to sponsor a pride event are guaranteed their brand will appear in numerous places, including the Pride organisation's own website, their social media pages, promotional literature including posters and flyers, merchandise banners, the list goes on. The opportunities for brand exposure are endless. Also, it's convenient for businesses. They can fulfill their corporate responsibilities to support the community and actively demonstrate how they are fulfilling their obligations as an equal opportunities employer. It seems like they are jumping on the social bandwagon with an ulterior motive for money. And this is an evident move away from what Pride once was. It raises questions such as how many employees of a company actually care. These companies such as Barclays, who were the major sponsor for London Pride last year, are dominated by cis white men. There's a facade of solidarity. It's incredibly convenient. In this way, commercialisation brings a different set of problems to those faced by activists in 1972. So have we lost all sense of an authentic and organic pride? And can there ever be such a thing as an authentic pride with commercialisation?
Thank you for that really, stop using these, I'll run out. That really great abstention floor speech. Now I'd like to turn back to the beginning, because there seems to be quite a high level of interest, and ask for another floor speech in proposition of the motion. I will take someone whose hand was up the last time, such as you there in the white t-shirt. Please come up.
Right, okay. First of all, just to cover a few points. First of all, it's clear to remember what the origins of Pride was. And Pride in the UK and the United States was an anniversary of the Stonewall riots. So Pride started as a protest. And it's also important to remember, in many countries, it still is a protest. And without a shadow of doubt, if you look at Pride, say, Romania, Pride in Kiev, or Pride in Moscow, for example, right? There's been a bit of debate around the cost of Pride and who has access to it, particularly the parade. And that's an interesting point. So it's important to remember you have a democratic right to protest. You don't have a democratic right to parade. So there's a lot more costs involved when you organise a parade compared to a protest. You have to pay for the streets to be closed off. You have to be paid for cleaning up afterwards. So by depoliticising Pride and making it a parade, you actually increase the costs you have, and therefore your reliance on then commercial companies to come into the bill afterwards. So maybe one trick to bring down the costs would be to make it protesting. No, not on the not. And it's also to think about what companies get from it. It's not just the great thing of, oh, I'm the LGBT friendly. In pure advertising means it's a golden opportunity for companies. If you think of London Pride, the amount of people that line the streets, you can a massive, it's like a billboard going through the centre of London. Instead of everyone walking past it, everyone's stopping and watching it. The amount they pay, that is a fraction of what they'd have to pay to get that same level of advertisement commercially. They'd be fools not to do it. So they made out as being really good at subsidising the cost, but actually it's a really, really, really cheap deal from them. So, you know, let's actually think about that quickly.
I was going to say, yeah, just so back out with like numbers. Companies will think it's fair to pay £1 million for a single like Facebook advert, which Hobus did, and they're paying a fraction of 700,000. So yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing.
So we need money to actually think about what we could do. And we've said before, like, what is there left to fight for? If you think there's nothing left to fight for, then no, Pride shouldn't be a protest. We've heard even from the speakers against about the charities that are closing, the issues we have just in the UK, never mind internationally, the stuff we have to fight for. So if we do have stuff to fight for, then we have to fight for it, which lends itself to being a bit of a protest. So maybe we should quickly.
So would you not regret the commercialization of Pride if they paid more money?
I come on to it a bit. I think it's a question of where you pay more money. I'm just like, let's take away the golden glint from how much we should be thankful for companies when actually they get a really good deal out of it. It's not because their hearts. It's probably very welcome. I think we should think about who's excluded from Pride and who's Pride really for. And I think that's the most oppressed in our communities, and they're the ones that can be excluded quite often as well. So if you look at Pride, particularly where there's lots of charges involved, you know, the gay person who's been thrown out of their house by their parents is now homeless, obviously can't get to that. But I think that's people that Pride should be for the most.
Thank you for a very fine proposition floor speech there. And again, I would like a second opposition floor speech. Does anyone in the room want to give a floor speech, 3 minutes or much less, if you just want to say a short thing in opposition to this motion? Looks like I have a hand over here in the blue stripy shirt. Please come up.
Right, this is probably going to be quite a lot shorter and a lot less formal than everyone else's. So I think there's one mistake which a lot of people have been making here today. We're lending agency to these massive faceless corporations. The previous speaker saying, oh, they don't really have it in their hearts to do this. But they don't have hearts. A company is simply a collection of people. Yes, sure, they get lots of advertising. They get amazing exposure. But at the same time, as the speakers were saying, as I think was the first opposition speaker, this is them showing to their own employees, and also their employees getting a chance to come out and say, well look, my company actually supports me for who I am. My company, they're nice in this respect. And at the same time, you're also having these companies, it's a pressure on other companies which makes it less friendly, at least openly, to say, we're not getting the best graduates, we're not getting the best people we could be getting. Maybe we should be doing the same thing.
If the companies really did care about their people, wouldn't they be doing more to actively support them as opposed to doing it for their exposure? If companies cared, they would try to build support networks for their employees. They would try to ensure that there was no discrimination within their companies, have policies for these things. But loads of these companies that are funding Pride and are like, sorry.
Surely this works both ways, in that if a company goes to Pride, then there's a pressure on them to develop support networks. And if they already have support networks, there's pressure on them to go to Pride. Also, one of the, I think it was the second opposition speaker, said something about how Pride here is free. it's free for everyone to come along to. Now, I'm from a country where Pride isn't free. It costs something like £30 to come along and participate as an individual, which is crazy. I remember actually going to a talk there by the head of a youth group saying that they couldn't get their members to come along because it costs too much, which is crazy. I remember my first Pride. I think a lot of people remember their first Pride, especially. It really is something to just come along and see all these people cheering, as was said. And yes, while companies might not be the greatest, while they might support slightly dodgy things, or very dodgy things, they give us the chance, which we wouldn't get otherwise, to come along and have its own, and to become less timid and more outward. Yes?
Isn't that sort of logic of diverting the attention from what the corporations are investing in to the fact that they're giving some money to the LGBT pride, pinkwash over the fact that these corporations are doing very heinous things, and that logic would justifying it?
The fact that we're discussing here at the moment, the fact that it always comes up at Pride, that oh, this company, they're a Pride, but they're supporting this and that, which is bad for the LGBT community, suggests that that's not the case. It puts in the spotlight that oh, this company supports Pride, but they're not doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for a great opposition floor speech there. And again, the third of the set, the last position you can have, abstention. Do I have anyone in the audience who wants to give an abstention floor speech? I think I do. Down there in the purple jacket. Please come up.
So I have sort of quite a bit to say. So there's lots of things to talk about here about commercialization.
motion, it is possible to regret the situation in which LGBT movement has actually found itself in, while still like saying that they have to act in that way when they were faced with that situation. So like it's possible to both regret this motion and also say that the LGBT movement acted in a way that was functionally like advantageous for them to do so at that time, right? So like I just want to like make that clear about the logic of this motion is not that like the LGBT movement shouldn't have done what they did, because they ultimately had to, but we can still regret that situation nonetheless. But like, look, actually, even if that is the case, right, I want to tackle a few things that were brought up by opposition today. First of all, the idea that you get a functional advantage. Look, like, arguably, if this is such an important event, the state should actually be providing resources for us to actually host it, right? Now, the argument against this, no thank you, which I'm anticipating, which has been made already, is that we simply don't have the money to be able to do this. This is false, and it's almost always an argument that is put forward by governments and by states that want to spend money elsewhere, but don't want to, no thank you, prioritize things that are actually important. Note that we spend probably far more on things like the Queen's 80th birthday and the royal wedding than we do on LGBT events. No thank you. We spend a lot more on prestige projects like the 2012 Olympics than things that are actually as important as LGBT pride. That is incredibly important because, no thank you, like considering that this is actually making a massive difference to people that are concerned here, like we probably should be putting more money into it as a state, and it's probably justifiable to do that. So the backlash point is raised. No thank you. Like, look, we think it's not reasonable if the LGBT community actually makes this demand of the state for them to refuse it and simultaneously engage in all of the prestige projects and other like useless expenditure that they actually do. So we think that it's actually probably better on our for opposition, like just to demand that the state actually should be providing for this. Okay, no thank you. Second thing, like the idea that like working like that, it's important that corporations are involved, both because people working inside those corporations like benefit in some way and because the message is spread around. Okay, first of all, on the message, like look, it's probably true that the message is probably getting out irrespective of whether corporations are facilitating this or not. Like I don't think that like, you know, LGBT pride brought to you by Barclays makes a massive difference to whether or not people know about and like get the message about LGBT pride. No, thank you. I think there's like a variety of other media through which LGBT can actually like like LGBT concerns can be disseminated. For example, films. For example, like other things that are actually incredibly important and don't necessarily need to be sponsored by the corporate like world and specifically by big businesses like Barclays. Second thing about like individuals working in these companies and the difference it makes to them. Like, look, it's probably not true, and it's probably a very sad state of affairs if it is the case that when I go to these marches, I think of myself as an employee of Tesco rather than as an individual that wants to be at these marches for my own benefit or because it makes a massive difference to me. Like, maybe it is important in certain instances that individuals see that their companies are sponsoring these things, but we think it's not necessarily a condition that companies do sponsor these things in order for these people to feel welcome within those companies. As was brought up in a very good point of information on this point previously, like, if the companies genuinely did care about the welfare of LGBT employees, they would probably take measures to improve the welfare of those individuals in those companies without actually like having a commercial benefit from it anyway. So like, look, it's possible to regret things in this motion, or it's possible to regret the commercialization of the LGBT community, even if they acted in the way that they have to, given the existing structures, because we can regret those structures themselves, and it's incredibly important that we do so and vote opposition today. Thank you.
Again, a very fine speech, though there was a lack of a snazzy jacket. So I'd like to now ask for an opposition floor speech again. Is there anyone who would like to give a floor speech in opposition on this motion? You in the green jumper and black.
So first of all, I just want to say that it makes perfect sense for Pride to be a celebration today, like in this country. Obviously not in like Moscow, where still Pride is a big protest and that sort of thing. But here it makes sense because we've actually achieved a lot since the original Pride marches, and I think it's really important that we should be able to celebrate the fact that trans rights become more visible. And I mean, equal marriage is a thing now. But moving on to what you said about how you can kind of regret the corporations coming in. I actually think it's a really good thing that it's commercialized. It actually makes Pride better. I really like the fact that people can come in and sell my identity. It means I can like buy a bunch of Slytherin merch and like pro-feminist merch, and I can plaster my walls with really dumb posters about all the things that I identify as. I think that's a really good thing. I think it's a way that you can celebrate your identity even once Pride's over. And the fact that there's a lot of money in it means that it's a much bigger celebration. It means that a lot more people can go there, a lot more people can enjoy it. It's still free for people to attend. It may not be free to walk in the parade, but it still means there's lots of security and there are lots of really good things. It means loads of people can go there and enjoy themselves. And you're right, there are lots of issues that people still need to be in support for. And I think, first of all, Pride's a good platform for people to get together and talk about this and say, yeah, we do need to work on the fact that 1 in 4 of the homeless population are gay. We need to do something about this. And Pride's a good place for people to get together on that. And so it's also a way to help that system. And on forms of other, on the point of there being other ways of funding it, I'd really hate for the state to fund Pride, because the state's currently run by the Conservative government. And while Conservatives, they're not that bad, but I really wouldn't want them running an LGBT movement, you know? Are you going to say something about how Conservatives are not that bad?
Like in general, when the state runs something, it's like the civil servants, and like, you know, the Tory stamp doesn't need to be on the barriers and all the functional things that you actually need to run these events.
Right. Yeah, but they still kind of have to invite UKIP, which is, I think, the general consensus is that we don't want that type of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't want the state to fund it. And charities, like, I'd much rather the charities are actually putting their money towards the issues like the fact that a lot of LGBT people are homeless and all sorts of other things. It's much better use of funding. The reason that we have companies doing it is because companies, they get something out of it, but they're also funding a good cause. It wouldn't make sense, ideally, yes, companies would be supporting real things, but they're not going to because they're selfish entities, but that's okay because we still get something out of it. I don't think you're allowed to go for it. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah.
Thank you for that excellent final speech in opposition of the motion. I'd like to now ask for a final floor speech overall and a final abstention floor speech specifically. Does anyone in here want to give an abstention floor speech? Perhaps you in the blue and stripy jumper. Please come up.
Hey, I have a confession. I marched in a branded t-shirt at Pride. I think it's important we actually make a distinction between adverts and people who work for companies who march of their own accord. We should have people marching in Pride, not big money. So I marched with my boyfriend rather than Labour because it was actually really important to him. The support he got from his workplace meant that he was actually finding out, not just to himself and his family and his friends, but more generally, it was actually really good for him. What I disliked was that the people in front of us were, it was a stand for Magic Mike, the film. They were paid to be there. They were basically models projecting what I think is a really bad stereotype of the LGBT community, and the fact that it's just white, toned men. I mean, I think that kind of, it goes against everything we need to be doing. It's basically saying, yeah, there's only room for white men. So yeah, it's kind of bad that they were then followed by me and my boyfriend, who were both white men. So I think, but I would like to make this distinction. But yeah, there's no room for adverts at Pride. I think that's disgusting. Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent final floor speech and some really amazing floor speeches across the board. It's going to be very difficult to decide who has won a wonderful prize, but I think all of the floor speeches added something to the debate, so please applaud them all with me. And now we come to the final thing in our debate. We come to the summary speeches. As I said, we will start with our very finely bow-tied opposition speakers, and then we'll get to the proposition speakers. Both opposition speakers will have 3 minutes in a row, and then the proposition summary speakers will have 3 minutes in a row. So if everyone is ready, I'd like to yield the floor to the first opposition summary speaker. No POIs, remember.
Hello. Oh, I'm scared. Thank you very much. That was very interesting to see your point of views. That I didn't do it. So when we are talking about kind of comparing pride and kind of politicizing together, making the process, I think what we have to be quite aware of is the fact that actually how many protests have occurred and have happened out there last year that actually have been kidnapped for wrong reasons and became unsafe for events. Yeah, so let's keep in mind. So when you organize a protest, and don't find this, you know, your transmission is let's protest. And then there's this group that is called as the yes from the UD, and they just kidnap the whole concept and just basically burn the whole high street down. Then the PR impact on the gay community will be massive. But Daily Mail, yeah, is going to write something completely different than what actually happened. The gays burning down the high road, yeah? So be very careful with things like this when you're organizing protests. Second thing, you don't have necessarily to choose between a protest and a pride. That's a celebration. It has been celebration for War, as we have heard. But the protests are still happening. You know, we do have the protest, the Black Card, we have the Occupy protests and all this sort of stuff that is happening. Millions of people have protested recently at the council offices against the capital facing, and well, I was probably know about it, so proud about. And that thing was part of the fact they were empowered by the pride they have taken part in before, so they had all cases, so they became public space. So they have been now empowered to be in public space and protest, which is obviously a good thing altogether. Now, protests are not necessarily very good, as already said, you know, so if you have those young people, I wouldn't necessarily, although council is a completely different thing, but I wouldn't necessarily take them to the protest for the specific reason that it wasn't very safe. It's also not very clear that if you are having a mobility issue or a might have not necessarily having any kind of impairments in terms of your cognitive skills, it might be very difficult to engage with the process. It can be very loud, so it's very difficult for you to hear what's being said, just to give you an indication. And obviously when we're talking about kind of the process itself, not means property, that's great. You can go on protests like people did about Black Card, which, by the way, is a commercial venue. So when we talk about commercialization, I think that a lot of those parts and laws and parts have been brought out by corporate organizations, right? So now we're all fighting those protected commercial venues that earn money on selling alcohol to our community, right? So let's keep that in mind at the same time when I say, well, let's not commercialize the product. It's quite interesting fun altogether. But do speak up.
Oh, sorry.
Too late. No. So, hesitation, yes?
Sorry, I thought commercialization is more about organizations.
Well, if you look at our heaven, for instance, part of the shares of heaven are owned by agency, for instance. Those are about big organizations, quite massive corporations. More interesting, Pride can attract money for the rest of the organizations. You can see it in Brighton, for instance. So Brighton is raising the money and then distributing it in Rainbow Park, which is a small organization platform in which we are not getting position enough to do, but we will in the future.
I think there was an interesting question in the first abstention floor speech, which was, does commercialization make Pride better? I think that's the wrong question. I think we should say, does it make Pride possible? And I think, yes, absolutely. That's the only way that Pride in London can happen. Who else is going to pay for it? It always goes back to that. If you look at Manchester Pride, for example, as well as you know, Sydney Pride and all these other, people have to pay £30 for a ticket, something ridiculous like that. There was also a mention there of some of these corporations not paying their taxes. Well, Pride is kind of a little way just to kind of claw back, especially with Starbucks marching in Pride. It's maybe one small way for us to claw back some of that money they might owe the state. So just food for thought there. I think it's also worth thinking that, you know, protests do change over time, and we need to be realistic. There's plenty left to fight for, absolutely. There are loads of great groups that are part of Pride. But if you want to go on a protest march, on a strict protest march, go on a street protest march. There's lesbian and gays that support the migrants. They're doing absolutely amazing stuff. And they might have a presence at Pride, but Pride isn't just about them. It's about them alongside everyone else there who might want to march with their other groups. These groups might be commercial interests. They might want to, some of these employees at Barclays and Citibank might actually feel proud to march under that banner. When I go and I march under the UCL banner, I don't agree with necessarily everything that UCL does. You know, yes, UCL could do further with fossil fuels, for example, but it still doesn't mean that I don't believe in marching under the banner of UCL. You can march with your group without necessarily agreeing with everything that they do. So that's another point for you just to think about. These corporate teams are proud to be with their colleagues. I think that there's been quite a lot here as well about down with capitalism. You know, there's this very divisive language that capitalism is evil, and I think we're setting up this kind of very false dichotomy that we can remove ourselves from capitalism right now. And this us and them language is also very dangerous, which came up in one of the opposition floor speeches. Not everyone agrees necessarily at Pride. Many of us are actually quite happy to protest and very quietly in our everyday lives against certain parts of the system we might disagree with. Pride itself doesn't have to be a massive radical protest. It can be a place for everyone, including me. I might disagree with some of the things at UCL. I might disagree with some of these points people have raised at Barclays and whatnot. But I'm still going to march with them side by side because I feel like at least Pride, we're all marching for something that we believe in, which is, you know, greater visibility, and we're celebrating some of the progress that we've made, and of course not ignoring that there's a hell of a lot further that we need to go as a community. Thanks very much.
Thank you to the opposition summary speeches. And now for the final speeches of the night, the proposition summary speeches.
First, I'd like to address this notion that we simply couldn't afford to march through the streets if Barclays didn't give a couple of £100,000 to us. The whole point of a project, where do you think they got their funding from in 1972, right? It didn't cost money. It doesn't cost. I was involved in the RIP Pride protest. We didn't pay anyone any money. In fact, that was part of the point. We broke through the barriers and refused to pay the fee that they charged anyone who wants to take part in that parade. And in terms of the cost, the context of why it cost so much, it was changed from a protest to a parade officially in 2004, which requires the paying of £100,000 to the City of London. Why was that necessary, I asked? Was it not possible to continue a protest? The fact is that this was an intensely political decision to shift the focus of Pride further away. It had started earlier. Commercialisation had started in the late 80s and 90s, but to shift the focus further away from the political roots that Pride was at the inception of Pride. The first opposition speaker just now mentioned that one of the problems of a protest is that you don't know, they're not safe, you don't know who's going to be on them, people might do things you don't like or agree with things you don't like. So what I think that's revealing is that there's a hidden agenda here, which is we want a Pride which are people like us, and we don't want a Pride that holds views like that. We don't want to march alongside people who might burn over a bin, but we will burn a bin and knock it over, but we will march alongside people holding banners, funding arms companies, burning cities in foreign countries, right? So it's revealed themselves to have a political choice involved here, and it is, we sympathize more with the corporations than with the victims of their corporate activities. And so I just want to finish on what I envision a Pride should be. For me, this is about solidarity, and it is about politics. I don't agree that this is about depoliticization. I think it's intensely political to allow and actually actively encourage the commercialization of Pride. I think it's about co-opting us. It's about forcing us to assimilate. It's about saying these are the gays we like and these are the gays we don't like. We certainly don't like transgender people. We don't like these types. We don't want black lesbians fronting the march. In fact, they didn't want the Trade Union Congress fronting the march, despite the Trade Union Congress's primary position in advancing LGBTQ rights in the workplace. Right? They were going to front the march with LGSM. However, they were pushed to Block C, which is exactly why LGSM moved back, because they needed to give pride of place to Barclays. Okay, so the fact is, we have to ask, who is it that's involved in struggling for our rights? Who is it that's fighting for us? I don't think it's the commercial entities. This is a contested space, and we have to decide who we want to side with in this contestation. Do we side with the rich and powerful, with the white gay men who've made it, or do we side with the oppressed, the dispossessed, the marginalized, the exploited?
So we talk about what I've heard points of, commercialization, is good, it makes it more inclusive. I mean, there's visible proof that it's not. Why there need to be loads of other offshoot independent events, such as the one I attended last year, called Queer Picnic, organised by members of the QT Park, or people who don't know what that is, queer, trans, and disabled people of colour, organising it in a park in Elephant Castle. And it wasn't this huge shouty ranty event where people just ranting about how bad the world is. That's not what I'm suggesting. There should be choice in terms of how people choose to express themselves and how they choose to protest against a society that tries to oppress them, either just by living and being able to show that they can live freely and happy, or if they want to actually address those points then. And that was a really good. It was a really nice, harmonious occasion, and the vast majority of those people who attended were young people, were students, which was a point, which relates to the point that second speaker mentioned about how we need to ensure that these are inclusive to young people. But young people are sort of an incredibly broad group of people, and it's not really hair-splitting to suggest that young people from, say, this socioeconomic background or this ethnic group should also feel like they need to be included. It's a very broad spectrum. And I just think that when we're weighing up pros and cons of a situation like Pride, you have to look at those who are affected the least, those who are affected the most, and how changing the status quo at the moment helps retain a balance between those two sides. And I think that whilst there are still there's still evidently disparagements in socioeconomic situations or social situations. I mean, I have figures from an American study from April 2015, which despite even though they were referring to American scope, given that the same power structures still lie within those same countries, it's good to assume that there's similar biases as well. For instance, the LGBT unemployment rate overall in the US is around 8%, but it rises 15% amongst black people, 14% for Latinos, and 11% for Asians. I think once there is that evident bias, there needs to be mechanisms in place to reduce it. And Pride was a very good method of doing so. And I think that it allows. It's not as beneficial if you have to then create an offshoot that for those specific groups within that marginalized community, because it's not just society as a whole that are perpetuating these issues. It also be within the community as well. So it also provides a good way in which we can become better allies for each other. So yeah. It needs to be more inclusive, and I think that commercialization does that.
I'll talk to whoever made a speech about stickers and stuff later. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
I think I can finally use this again, which is really good. Thank you to the proposition summary speeches, and thank you to all of the main speakers again. I asked for rounds of applause for all of them twice before, but please, as a final round of applause, one really big one for them. Put your all into it.
Yeah, because
sure. Yeah. It's always a good thing to be aware of pronoun usage. Matt uses they, so if anyone speaks on that, please make sure to use they when you're interested. Yeah, I thought that was an excellent debate, and I'd like to thank all of the main speakers for giving up their time and their energies and bringing some really well-rehearsed, well-made cases, and all of the floor speakers for bringing some things which we didn't hear and bringing some great cases of their own. Yeah? Sure.
Sorry, I love a little training announcement. Just to let you know, there is a Pride open meeting that you can come and discuss with Karen discussing it on the 8th, within reason, on the 8th of March in City Hall. So it's in the evening for 7 o'clock. So do come along because we want to hear what you could say. Sorry, I was asked to do that pitch, so
it's always great to get more involved with the debate. I encourage you to do that. And also, if you want to continue talking about the debate, you can come with us to our radio social venue, the bar at TCR, where we'll be going directly after this. You can spot committee members in either these red hoodies or these LGBT History Month shirts. Only one of those excellent floor speeches can win one of these prizes. So I'm going to announce who won as soon as we've held a final vote tonight as well. So if I can get my 2 volunteers up at the front to count the votes, see the room's changed. Have you been persuaded? Have you learned new things? Have you shifted or have you stayed the same? So, from the 3 positions of proposition, opposition and abstention, who in this room is now a proposition voter? Who votes with proposition on the motion, this House regrets the commercialisation of LGBT plus pride? Excellent, looks like you've got those numbers down. Who thinks they are now an opposition voter? Who votes opposition on the motion, this House regrets the commercialisation of LGBT plus pride? And finally, I think, who thinks they are an abstention voter? Who does not commit themselves to proposition or opposition, but stays with abstention? Who is an abstention voter? Thank you. Thank you for your votes, and thank you for attending the night. I'm just going to remind you again that this Thursday at 7 we'll be running our debating training sessions. If you want to learn to speak as well as any of these or any of these people you've seen up in front, make sure to come along after buying membership. And next Monday at 7, we've got our next public debate. This one is on the motion, this House will remove the ban on prisoners voting in the UK. We deprive them of their liberty. Should we also deprive them of their voting rights? There are reasons to do it, and there are reasons to not do it. So I encourage everyone here to come along to that. I'm expecting it to be as fun and explosive a night as tonight was. I'm just going to wait for my Vice President to count up the result of the vote. But I already have the name, if we can have quiet, the name of the winning floor speech. As I said, many floor speeches were really good, but we had to go with one in the end, and it was not because of them fixing the microphone, it was because of their excellent and substantive points they made. So if I can get Adam up to the front. Are you sure you want to refuse?
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy with yesterday.
I don't want to be carrying it around and not drinking or eating. You're torturing me here.
What do you want?
Take them and share them with the social media.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And now I can announce the results of the vote. And after that, of course, we'll be going to the bar at TCR to continue the debate in a less formal setting. We've got a 10% discount there. We might have some of the speakers there to chat with. We'll certainly have me, so come along immediately afterwards.
Raising that.
Initially, before the debate tonight, we had 10 votes in opposition. We had 23 votes in proposition, and we had 28 votes in abstention. Now, you need to remember some things during debates. People leave, people come in, students are unfamiliar with certain things and tend to sway one way or the other. But after the debate tonight, we had 11 votes in abstention. Abstention lost a lot. We had 19 votes in proposition, who lost a few, and we had 25 votes in opposition, who gained a lot. We had -4 proposition, -17 for abstention, and +15 for opposition. So it looks like that's how the night went. If you want to see how the night goes now, come to the bar. Come to